Okay, we are about to start. So this is a Frontier panel, and part of the objective of the Frontier panel is, first of all, to kind of introduce you what is a Frontier project. You only learn this by hearing from people that have done some. The other objective is kind of get you acquainted with what you need to think about, whether it's how do you wrap foundational research into a large project? How do you, what should you expect as you propose, as you write proposals? What do we at NSF and our panelists, and what do we instruct our panelists to look for? And frankly, you'll hear some interesting things about several of the projects that we funded. So we have a panel of 4. We have Brandon Lucia from Carnegie Mellon University. He has a Frontier that was funded, started something like July of 2022. We have Soumik Sarkar from Iowa State University, who has a Frontier that we have co-funded with NIFA, and it deals with CPS agriculture. Sriram Sankanarayan, did I pronounce it right? Okay, I knew it because I've worked with him before, is part of a Frontier with, led by Meeko Oishi from University of New Mexico, kind of dealing with learning and autonomy and people. And our last is Ricardo Sanfelice, who leads a second Frontier project that was funded this year, dealing with control and design with some, I would say, in fact, during our kickoff that we had, I kind of challenged, guys, how can you reduce development time by, what did you say, a factor of 4? Something like that. And he's going to tell us about his project. And we'll hopefully have some good interchange. You'll hear about the projects and have an opportunity to ask some questions. I prepared a set of tough questions for these guys also. So should be an interesting discussion. So the first talk, short talk by Brandon Lucia.
Sure, the questions won't be tougher than the reverse site visit questions, though, would they? All right, thanks for the introduction. I'm Brandon Lucia. I'm from Carnegie Mellon, and I'm going to tell you about the work that we're doing in our Frontier project on software-defined nanosatellite constellations. This is CPS in space. I'm going to start with sort of an executive summary just to give you the idea of the goals that we have in mind as we set out on this center. We just got funded this year, and so we're in the bootstrap, and we're getting things together, and we're starting to move really quickly on this. Our goals are to improve the autonomy of satellite-based systems, and that means we need to take the raw ingredients of kind of foundational CPS research, put those things to practice in satellite-based systems and constellations of satellites, which means big groups of satellites. We want especially to focus on flexibility, and the way that we think about that is software definition. So that means you don't just make bespoke satellite constellations like is happening all the time today. We want these to be flexible and repurposable and taskable. We need efficiency and we need scale to support a lot of the CPS applications we have in mind for satellite systems. We need scale, and that's predicated on having efficient system designs. And then one of the main goals we have with this center is that we want to provide access to space, and we want to democratize the resources that we put into low Earth orbit, so that not just us and really not even just researchers, although those people will have access to this, but anyone in industry or in research has access to infrastructure. And so this will be doing some of the foundational work there to make that possible. I want to give a nod to my team. I would have to go through 15 slides to put all the students here, but I can show you just this is the team that we have. And one thing I want to point out is that we have a super interdisciplinary team. We have people that span from core space system design, controls, and motion planning, and we have the kind of theory of federated learning and ML expertise. I work on computer architecture and systems and intermittent computing, and we put all these pieces together, and that's what makes that's what makes this thing work, is that we have covered a lot of different areas of expertise. I'm going to give you just a pretty high-level view of what we're doing in the center. I probably have too much content, so you can throw something at me when I need to stop talking. But I want to give an idea of some of the kind of technically what we're doing to give some context for the frontier scale of the project and provide some context for the panel. So let's go to space and see what we can do. One kind of overarching thing we get when we go to space is that we have the ability to continuously and globally have access to sensor data. And this is one of the perks of launching things into orbit, is we can have a downward view. This can be visual imagery data. It can be other types of data. So we can support applications like, hey, the Olympics are going to be in LA. Can we do real-time or near real-time assessment of big public gathering situations like this? We could find things in the fire lane. We could look for security threats or something happening in an entry or exit area. With the same infrastructure, we can monitor the millions of kilometers of civil infrastructure, oil pipelines and power lines and roads and things like that, where we can have sort of fine-grained analytics continuously around the world. We can even do things for which there's no real incentive today, like watch large empty areas of the ocean continuously, because if something happens there, like we have a plane crash or something, we can respond to that if we're looking at it. There's no incentive to do that today with bespoke launch, but with the vision that we have for satellite constellations in the future, we'll be able to support these kinds of applications. Space is getting cheaper. It used to be that you needed $650 million to put together a satellite to do Earth observation. Now you need like $2,000 and a few grad students for a semester, and you can make a satellite and launch it to Earth's orbit. We've been doing that, and it's a really fun, exciting thing to do. Talk to me afterwards if you want to learn about that. The consequence of moving to CubeSats and even to smaller form factors like pocket cubes is that we're able to put a lot more things into orbit. This is happening with large-scale commercial constellations that we're seeing emerge, but also a lot of activity around CubeSats and research-based launches. So we can have hundreds of nanosats in orbit today. We can have constellations of hundreds are feasible today. If you have a really large amount of money, then you can put constellations of thousands up and operate something like Starlink. There's a lot of drawbacks with the way things are done today, and these are fundamental core challenges that we're addressing with our frontier. These are remote-controlled sensors. All the satellites that are up there today doing Earth observation operate by having someone in a command center on the ground type a command on a keyboard, and then that gets beamed up to the satellites individually. There's very little autonomy. There's very little kind of collective motion planning. They're not even doing computing in the satellites in a majority of cases. They're just these are dumb remote sensors beaming all of their data back down to Earth. There's so much potential here, but it's just untapped. It's something that we are really motivated by, is the kind of lack of options in today's systems. To be quantitative, I'm not going to get too deep into the setup of this experiment. I'll just give you the punchline numbers. A satellite goes around Earth. It can downlink per pass about 37.5 gigabytes of data, which is actually a pretty decent amount of data. That's actually a lot. So if we have a sort of optimistic deployment here, like we have ground stations at the poles and we're flying around the pole every time we complete an orbit. So we can downlink 37.5 gigabytes of data. Unfortunately, we can collect about 634 gigabytes of data. So that's way too much. If we go to hyperspectral bands, we can collect even more than that. Was that a timer? 2 minutes. Okay, sure. So we can collect even more data than that. We're looking at models that have kind of a lower end, over a terabyte of data collected on orbit per pass. So there's really no way that we can beam all the data down and use the operating model that we have had in place for a long time. So we're proposing that we do software-defined nanosatellite designs, where we put the computer inside of the satellite, and then we need to have distributed motion planning, distributed actuation, distributed sensing and communication to support applications inside of these satellites. I've given you the gist of the center. We've broken the problem down into 5 themes, and I'll address them superficially here. We can talk later if you're interested. We're looking at computing inside of nanosatellites. This is one of the core problems. The connection between computing and distributed actuation and control problems across a satellite constellation. Machine learning and autonomy as a core driver of both of those things, the need to do motion planning and actuation and the need for computing. Communication, where we're prioritizing every precious bit we send down. We want to make sure it's the right bit to send down. And then infrastructure as one of the main goals of the project is to deploy infrastructure that's going to be useful to other people. Our goal is to make space easy. We want to have reusable infrastructure where on the ground you can type make deploy, and moderated by systems that we run, you'll be able to push your application to a constellation. And our goal is, over the years of this project, to actually be deploying satellites to orbit that can support whatever applications you have in mind, and to run actual services, actual CPS applications in orbit. We have a suite of tools we can use to plan missions and to do autonomy after we've launched. We have cheap, deployable ground station equipment. We're already deploying new equipment on campus, even since we started the project. And we are kind of flight tested in some of our designs already. We've done a couple of launches, even very recently. The video in the corner is actually one of our launches being deployed. This was in 2019, and this was one of our collaborators. You'll see the satellite pop out of that. That's actual on-orbit video, which was a very exciting thing to receive. So I guess with that, that was the very rapid-fire version of what's going on in our Frontier project on software-defined nanosatellite constellations.
Thank you.
All right. Hi, everyone. My name is Sriram Shankaranarayanan from University of Colorado. I will be presenting this on behalf of Meeko Oishi, who's our PI on this project. Unfortunately, she couldn't make it here in time. Where is the next slide, please? Oh,
it's right there.
Oh, right there.
The big green button.
Big green button. Thank you so much. Right, so the title of this project is Cognitive Autonomy for Human CPS. So just to let you imagine a little bit of what we had in mind, I wonder how many of you have read Andy Weir's excellent science fiction novel called The Project Hail Mary. It's a really, really nice novel. And part of what you read when you read this is the protagonist is in a spaceship going towards a planet to save the Earth, all of that stuff, right? But the spaceship has a computer interface, like a CPS interface. And initially, it's not going to let the protagonist operate functions of the spaceship because they are too mentally impaired because of the long sleep, because of all the trauma they have faced, right? So the interface starts to adapt to them as they become more and more capable. The interface allows them more and more ability, more and more control authority. And these are very inspiring for us because we would like to build similar kinds of interfaces in our project where our interfaces need to be able to adapt to users at different skill levels. Maybe a complete novice comes to use, the interface has a different feel and capability for them, as opposed to an expert who is very well versed with the system. So we wanted that kind of an interface that adapts to differences in users' skill level, but going beyond skill level, how much do they trust the autonomy? How much attention are they willing to put towards the autonomy? How stressed out they are? How capable they are? And what are their priorities? So we would like to build interfaces that adapt to different mental states of the user and be able to function differently, provide them different levels of support based on that. And so the question is, how do we do this? And how do we do this in a safe manner where we are not locking the user out of critical things, where we are not making the overall system unsafe? So that was the overall goal we set out to achieve. Let's see. All right, so the main vision here then is to look at a lot of different inputs that come from the user, and these could be behavioral cues, these could be things like their heart rate measurement, EEG measurements, measurements from all kinds of sensors to try and integrate it and think about some of these mental models, some of the aspects of the user's mental state, like their skill level, their trust, and track them as if you would track your dynamical variables inside a control system through a state estimation, through a mental model. So that was one of the things we had in mind starting out, and that's a very, very difficult problem, but we wanted to take a crack at it. Then we wanted to learn how different individuals differ in terms of different mental models. We wanted to anticipate what a user is likely to do. And if what they are likely to do is bad, then we wanted somehow to prevent it. So there is a notion of formal methods, runtime monitoring, and verification that's deeply embedded into this project. We also wanted to provide communication that's transparent, multimodal, that people can really, that don't slow people down. So we wanted to put good interface design there and enable like safe, effective, reliable performance for any skill level. So that was the main idea here. This is the team we put together. So the team has control theorists, people who work on autonomous systems, human factors, human-centered design people. Some of us are theorists like me, and a lot of people do human subject experiments with people in the loop, and we designed a lot of these experiments up front. We are now starting to run them. And we had industry partners like Raytheon, Sandia National Labs, which is in New Mexico. So this was the setup for the whole project. We divided the project into 4 thrusts, but I'm not going to describe the thrust. If you're interested more in how we approached writing this proposal, I'm happy to talk to you about it. Let me talk a little bit about the research we've done so far. I didn't want to cram all of them into a single slide. One example of something I really enjoyed working on was trying to model how humans make decisions. So here we put people behind a driving simulator, and we presented different road conditions with different obstacles in front of them, and we tracked exactly how they drove, where they were gazing at, what were their inputs. We measured heart rate, we measured EEG, and the goal was to build a model on how drivers make decisions. Together with one of my students and people at Purdue, we worked on this idea called artificial risk fields, taking ideas from robotics and cognitive science to actually build a probabilistic model and condition it on the data. So we have been doing some very interesting research that I wouldn't have been able to do if I weren't part of this big CPS Frontiers team. Moving right along. What we would love to do as an outcome of this project is to start designing interfaces that take all these psychophysiological sensors and use them for control and be able to have cognitive state feedback to accelerate how fast people can step into a task that they are unfamiliar with and quickly learn that task and be able to do it like an expert. So with that, I will talk a little bit about the Summer Research Initiative. So we have an outreach program for students from URM, underrepresented minorities. We have a sociologist, someone who's an expert in education, and we've been thinking a lot about what makes someone want to belong to a community. How do we foster a sense of belonging? How do they think about themselves as I am part of CPS, not someone as I am outside of CPS? And how do we do this during a summer with a bunch of students? So we have a fairly well-integrated REU program which talks about some of these aspects as well. So I will stop here, and thanks for listening to me.
So let's go to our next set, and this would be Ricardo.
Thank you, David, and thank you for the invitation. And Ricardo Sanfelice from University of California, Santa Cruz. All right. Very excited to show you the project that we prepared, and this just started in July, as David mentioned. This is a multidisciplinary project where we are looking at ways to design the computing and the algorithms of cyber-physical systems in a jointly manner. Thank you. And for that, we need expertise that is not only about algorithms, but also about computer architecture, optimization, and real-time systems. And so this team builds from all that. But also, since there's quite a bit of importance of this project on industry, we have a solid group of industry partners that are unfunded, but very interested to work with us on these ideas of how to design computing and software at the same time. And let me just start with the type of applications that we are motivated from range from the standard vehicles that you're probably familiar with, ground vehicles, but also expands to marine and aerial vehicles so that we can understand how multi-platforms, different problems, and different computing architectures will actually benefit from these strategies. So it's no surprise for many of you that in all of these platforms these days, what you do is to sample the system, update the signal to the system, typically called the plant. But one of the things that we are focusing here is, do we know really how long this takes to terminate, to compute? And when can we stop it? And can we do something about the architecture, the computer architecture that runs the software? Or even better, can we design the software to really run well on the computer architecture? Okay? So it turns out that when you look at this, as control systems people, and myself, guilty of that, we throw control theory to a computer architecture. We are thinking much about what the computer architecture really is, perhaps no more than sampling time, right? That's a typical question that we ask. We don't care about memory, we don't care about multi-cores, we don't care about communication between processes, and how real-time systems really work all the time. I'm not generalizing here, but at least on my realm, that's what we do. And on the other hand, what you probably imagine that there is quite a bit of a community working on the hardware architecture aspects of computing in general. But they actually, at the same time, they don't really pay too much attention in general about how feedback control algorithms will run in their computer architecture. So there is this disjoint that we advocate in our proposal, and that's essentially the gap that we would like to close in this project that just started. So typically in application like a self-driving vehicle, you can imagine that you will probably update periodically or after some events your system inputs, your actuators. And what we're really trying to figure out here is when there is a missed deadline, what will happen, right? And actually design systems that will actually not have those kind of missed deadlines. So with this cartoon kind of picture, one thing that is very exciting about this project, in my opinion, is that there is a very clear interconnection between cyber and physics, which makes the cyber-physical system credible. Essentially, the way that physics evolve depends on how the cyber performs. And the same way, the way that you measure the physics will affect how the computing will evolve. And that is an intertwined CPS, really, really nice example and application. So one of the things that we see as challenges in this project, and we propose a number of solutions, is how do we actually integrate hardware and software into models, and how detailed should those models be in order to make decisions that really have this marriage between computing and control. And one of the things that we advocate is co-design, again, software and hardware. And this is because, as you probably know, the computational performance of single-core processors is plateauing after many years of actually very good performance, but now we are at a point where we cannot do much more with single-core processors. So this is the overall cartoon of the whole project. We have industry, as I said, Toyota is involved, Joby Aviation, a local company in the neighborhood of Santa Cruz that is developing electric vertical takeoff and landing taxi vehicle, air vehicle, and a number of other partners as well, NTNU with the marine vessels expertise, IMT with expertise on model predictive control, and a number of other opportunities, as you see right here, for outreach and education. In a nutshell, as I'm probably going to be running out of time soon, the idea is that we are given a specification for our cyber-physical system, and we don't start assuming that this is going to run on a particular platform. We actually design a model of the physics and the potential platform that we might use, and then we do design the algorithm. And with that, we do verify, implement, and test, so we go all the way for the validation stage. But one of the things that we do is actually we can redesign or adjust our algorithms as we go forward in time. And then maybe, in addition, we might be able to also change how the algorithms actually run in runtime. So that's one of the opportunities because of automated feedback control systems that we have. And we have a number of thrusts. We have 6 thrusts. 4 of them are research thrusts, and two of them are cross-cutting, education, and outreach. All right, so I will leave it right here where we actually show you some of the platforms that we are interested in working on, and we will address any questions later. Thank you.
All right. So my name is Soumik Sarkar. I'll introduce our Frontier project Coalesce. And as David mentioned, there is an Ag CPS project where if you look at today's U.S. agriculture, it's been, primarily dominated by large-scale, agriculture with large fields, large equipment, indiscriminate spraying of chemicals without even knowing what we are spraying chemicals for. So we want to fundamentally change that with smaller heterogeneous platforms, CPS-enabled heterogeneous platform that can do scale-agnostic agriculture. So not only your large farms are profitable, but also small, medium-scale farms become profitable. We want to, find out exactly where to apply chemicals when, and do that accordingly so that we do not pollute the environment, in a really, really bad way. So I think it's anyway. So the three scientific frontiers that we are attacking is a biophysics-aware machine learning and decision control actuation using individual sensing and individual actuation. So can we do things at a one plant or a few plant scale? And then also, can we build coordinated teams of dexterous robots? And then in terms of sensing, we are using multimodal sensing in Planta, advanced imaging, multimodal payloads, and also in multi-platform. So in satellite data, aerial UAVs, and then in-situ cameras, robotic imaging, and across the board. And then in terms of individualized plant modeling, so we do it in both in greenhouses or in growth chambers, where we would like to understand what's going to happen in future with future climate and how things are going to change. But at the same time, we want to make sure that the CPS technology that we are building are applicable in the in-field conditions where things are really, really uncertain, and you still want to make sure that your sensing and your modeling aspects do work in this case as well. So, and not only, you want to take sensing for your scientific and control applications, but this also gives an opportunity to plant science and agriculture and breeders to essentially use this for doing things in a remote fashion. So this is actually a real scenario where we had a breeding experiment going 3 hours away from Ames, where we live, and the breeders were doing the entire breeding and scouting of the field remotely from Ames. And this is something very close to Illinois. So I just wanted to mention one sort of example project to give you a sense of how we are sort of doing the entire CPS aspect in this context. So the problem of insect pests is a big one, especially with changing climates. Things are getting warmer, so you're getting more and more insect pest attacks. So this is a situation where a farmer actually in 2021, he looked around his field on a Friday and seemed everything is fine. He scouted manually, everything was fine. Went back home, came back on a Monday, and the entire field was gone due to a particular insect pest called fall armyworm. And honestly, I never thought that Ag CPS would be a time-critical system, but it turned out it is. In matter of 2-3 days, the entire field was gone. So one of the interesting things that we are doing as, again, a collaborative CPS project, that can we do the entire cycle of sensing, figuring out what insects are there. And one of the things is interesting is that two very similar looking insects, one may be good for you and one may be bad for you. So to identify what things are actually good and take mitigation actions with chemicals, but otherwise it's really, really critical. So we built something very exciting in the year one with an insect pest app that is getting released publicly for free. But one of the things is that to do that, we used a large data set of citizen scientists built data set and a lot of advanced machine learning tools, including self-supervised learning, large language models, and really got to a classifier that really works in the wild. And we demonstrated that in the farm progress show this year. It was a great success. So, but we don't want to stop, of course, there. We want to close the sensing actuation loop with robots that have dexterous arms. So this is one of our first target that can a dexterous arm go look for these insects and way before any manual scouting would find out, and essentially neutralize them if necessary, or if they're good pests, to let them go. So also there are other exciting aspects because as you know, a rural agriculture setting is a communication starved region in many cases. We do not have very strong 5G or that kind of connectivity. So doing a lot of edge computing with decentralized learning, as opposed to federated learning with central parameter server, really do a peer-to-peer learning for this context becomes extremely important. These are our education outreach aspect. We started a new CPS minor at Iowa State that we're very proud of. And also there's a lot of informal learning aspects that we're putting 2-minute YouTube modules for the public and the farmers. And these are the couple of new, not necessarily new, like last 3-4 years, workshops that we've been running to build the cyber ag systems community that I'm hoping a lot of you will be part of. Thank you.
So I created a set of questions that if I were in the audience, one of the things what would I ask? And, one of those questions, we heard at some level some really cool application stories. So the question is really, when I talk about Frontier, I talk about core research. And so kind of the question, and I'd like each of you just in a minute to kind of say, for your proposal, for your project, how did you show you're doing core foundational research and also impacting not just one domain, one application domain, but the idea can be applied in several. So let me start this with Brandon.
Go ahead. Does this work? Or? No, it's, okay, no, yeah. Yeah, that's a good question. So I think part of it actually was team formation. So we put together a team where we had pretty broad expertise. And I think that has been the key to our ability to isolate specific kind of foundational CPS topics, but also to have impact on several different domains. So I guess this is sort of getting into the meta of what this panel is, but if you're thinking of doing one of these, be very careful with who you choose for your team. You want to make sure that you're covering these areas. As an example, well, I guess another thing is we were sort of motivated by the applications. And it wasn't sort of a singular focus to say we realize the application, that's the success of the center. That's one dimension of success of the center, is to be able to put these applications into practice and have real implementations of things in the world. We want to see where the rubber meets the road. But also you study the applications that are behind the whole thing, and then we find, okay, there's new sort of fundamental problems that we need to solve along the way. And those fundamental problems crop up in each of the areas individually that we have expertise in. For example, under-actuated space-based systems, we need to do precise actuation. But then also in the interaction between the areas. So we have a kind of interesting link between doing resource-constrained computing, and that entails new computer architectures, new software systems, and OS, this kind of things, dovetailed with the motion planning and actuation as a form of resource allocation in an operating system. So that's an example of where you kind of look across areas and you can see the connection between them, and that creates a new fundamental impact.
Okay, thank you, Brandon. How about you, Soumik?
Yeah, so in our project, in terms of, so we have domain scientists like, ag experts, plant pathologists, agronomists, and then us, right? Machine learning people, controls people, roboticists. So we sort of formed these projects as, sort of these joint projects where, we have some domain experts and some of us, some CPS people, and we want to make sure both parties are motivated enough. So we look for use-inspired research. So what is the critical pain point from the domain that demands a new CPS solution, and kind of drive towards that so that we could publish in our, and we could sort of advance our methods and our algorithms, but at the same time, and literally, we have usually two types of papers. One is where we are lead authors and we are trying to push our CPS ideas, and then domain papers in scientific literature where they are sort of driving their agenda. So to make sure that, in addition to what Brandon said, that you are building this multidisciplinary team, but we have to keep them both sides motivated so that you're both driving their own agenda and really want to collaborate, because again, this has to be bidirectional in some way. So that is something that we really worked hard to figure out.
Okay, Ricardo, how about you?
Yeah, for us it was, when we identified the problem, which it wasn't easy to understand the overall questions we wanted to answer, excuse me. We focus on establishing a team that will be able to collaborate as a whole, which is a great idea, but it's a challenging thing, but also in sub-teams. So one of the things that we did is to build a postdoc plan that will allow us to essentially rotate postdocs from different institutions and collaborate between 2 or 3 PIs. We're talking about 7 PIs with maybe 4 different domains of different journals, different conferences, and different interests. So I was very interested and advocate of having opportunities to make a small subset of teams collaborate and build contributions, core contributions. But, as Soumik was saying, building the team is probably the most important part of building a frontier proposal. And that starts with maybe 1 or 2 people, maybe 3 people, and understanding what are the key challenges and what are the contributions that can be made is very critical.
Okay, how about you?
Well, I don't have much to add. I think building a team is very important. But I would say this, right? So when you talk about core contribution versus application, I think the main challenge in a CPS Frontiers project is to not make it look like you took those two together and somehow glued it on, right? So a lot of times what we found is, I've been part of successful one and unsuccessful ones as well. And I think the main difference is, I think everything needs to come together organically, where the core problems you identify have extremely interesting theoretical ramifications, like really nice problems that go beyond the next PhD thesis. You have to think about the next 5 PhD theses that could come out of it, as well as very important, interesting applications where the application domain people are not like, this is contrived, right? So they also understand that this is core, this is very important, these are challenging problems, and we have a really nice angle on this, right? So the way it came together for our project, which was ultimately successful, was that it came together organically. The core ideas and the applications somehow meshed together, and we could really see eye to eye on everything. And I think that made it very successful, very easy for us to put the proposal together. It kind of wrote itself in a sense, right, once the ideas were there.
Great. So let me tell you, one of the things that we as program directors sometimes think about. So frontiers, for everyone, can range up to $7 million. And if you look at a medium's 1.2 million. So the question is kind of, how do you make the value proposition? How did you in your proposal that this one project idea is really worth 5 or 6 medium proposals? So let me start with Ricardo first.
Thank you. That's a great question. That's a great question. And the proposal for us started early on with just a few of us, and it was clear that we needed to find different expertise to solve the problems we wanted to actually tackle on. And when you look at the combination of algorithms and computing, certainly you could probably build a medium-sized proposal, but that will not essentially lead to enough resources and enough expertise in order to solve the questions that we wanted to solve. So we had to tap on expertise that goes into, as I said, 4 or 5 domains, and that required essentially a large budget to start. Because the questions that we want to answer are very, in our opinion, very impactful for the community, for cyber-physical systems. So what I would say is that for us, it's not the combination of multiple medium projects, because we need, in order to solve the questions, the expertise of the 7 PIs that is in the proposal.
Okay, thank you. Soumik, how about you?
Yeah. So, so my slides were actually got mixed up, so I couldn't show the team. But we had, individual small-scale and medium-scale projects before on similar topics, where we are looking for, sort of answer small questions in this big scheme of things. And our main partner at Illinois, they also had, similar projects were looking into, sort of myopic way, small things that they want to get to. But one of the things that we realized that unless we show a significant leap and good, strong proof of concept, none of these are eventually gonna get adopted or commercialized in a right way. So we really wanted to do that. And to do that, we wanted to have to bring all these people together, along with cyber infrastructure and cyber folks from University of Arizona, where they also built the Cybers platform with NSF support before. So we really wanted to bring a very different things together to make things get over the hump. And then I agree with you in terms of the budget and the resource that it sort of brings, sort of really helped us bring things together. And also, in my mind, the time. That a medium project goes in 3, sometimes 4 with no cost extension, but with Frontier, you can go 5 and sometimes even 6 years. And that, especially with ag, where we get only 1 season every year to try things out, it really takes that time and this large team together sort of to get. So it's definitely not a bunch of 3 or 4 medium projects put together, but much beyond that.
How about you, Sriram?
Yeah, so I think I've served on NSF Frontier panels as well, and I think it's one of the key critiques we level against proposals, that this is just 5 NSF mediums pasted together, right? But I think in our project, the way we tried to get around this was we had a lot of back and forth. So the challenge with studying humans is you need to run a lot of experiments, a lot of carefully designed studies on where you put people in different situations and see how do they make decisions, what influences their decision making. And these studies are very intricate, often qualitative, and the challenge is also like, what comes first? Like, do we need those studies? Then do we do some theory building? Then do we go back and test those theories, right? So in some sense, we found that we needed each other. Every part of the project needed every other part of the project, and we couldn't just do it in isolation. But the challenge there is to demonstrate that in the proposal while writing, to show that how we need each other to do this big effort that comes together around a single theme. And I think we managed to do it, and part of it I should give full credit to Meeko Oishi's leadership in bringing everyone together, making us all a well-integrated team well before we wrote the proposal, so that all of that came through in the proposal and during the reverse site visit.
Okay, great. Brandon? Same question.
Yeah, and I think I'll just kind of piggyback on what I'm hearing from the other panelists here. The way I think about it is that convergence is key, and integration is itself an enormous research challenge in a lot of cases, especially if you're looking across a diverse array of problem domains and subdomains. The way that I think about the glue a bunch of mediums together approach to a frontier is that that's a great recipe to fail. Fail to get funded, first of all, but also a great way to fail at a convergent project that actually works across the boundaries of those domains. And I think that it's actually it takes a long time. You put the team together, and then you have to get everyone speaking the same language. And this is partly a bonding exercise where you all become comfortable with the ideas that you're working on together and thinking about and developing. And this is 6 months or 8 months of just kind of getting that done. But also it helps to refine some of the core kind of technology ideas. In our case, one of the things that makes this pretty distinct from a big bag of mediums is that we have a very high activation energy for this project, because we're intending to really launch things into space, and that's not cheap to do. So it would be difficult to do that piecemeal across many smaller projects if we want to support this kind of infrastructure. It's really only possible through a bigger coordinated, convergent effort like a Frontier.
Okay. Let me see if, are there any questions from the audience? If not, I have a couple that I can ask. So, any questions? Let me ask, I see, yeah.
So in the call, it talks about going beyond just sharing particular artifacts. You talked a little bit about the research. Can you talk a little bit about that outreach, sharing, that accompanies the research, and how that works here compared to
Well, I have.
Oh, go ahead.
So my response to that is, I mean, I'll give you an example and tell you what we're doing that addresses that point. It's not just, write some papers and then put stuff on the website and that's it. In my spiel, one of my slides showed a picture of, let's offer a service like Make Deploy, and you can run your code on our satellites. That's a big vision with a lot of moving parts underneath it, and when we're successful at that, then this is a pretty unique research artifact that's available to the community that's beyond like, try our simulator, try our code, whatever. I'm super in favor of try our simulator, try our code, but this is it took a lot of planning to get even to where we are now to be able to do that aspect of the project, and it's a pretty heavy lift actually to support something like that. So that's my take on it.
So let's go to we have another question.
So these large type of projects, often you saw all the faculty of different groups and departments involved, but at least from my very limited experience, as important is to have good staff that can actually keep that going. So I wonder if you have any recommendations, insights, and all that as to whether, this was largely, in your case, you were able to do it kind of a traditional faculty plus grad students or postdocs maybe role, or whether you lean more heavily, as seems to be the case in more recent successful proposals, on professional staff that help with presentation, organization, outreach, getting support letters, all the stuff that differentiate a good proposal from a successful proposal.
So let me first turn to Ricardo, who kind of has one perspective, and there's another perspective from Sriram. So go ahead.
Yeah, great question. When we were thinking about submitting a Frontier proposal, a couple of us were looking at ways to build a team. And at UC Santa Cruz, it happened that there was an opportunity by the Office of Research that will give us a seed fund to actually write a large proposal. It had to be more than $3 million and multi-year. So we applied to that, and we got it. And it was invaluable help. They helped us set up meetings and go through the solicitation, which is very extensive piece of work. You need to nail down all the items and get them in compliance, and then interact with the different campuses. Now, at the end of the day, it turned out that the campus already is doing that for all proposals, right? But we got kind of, a speed lane or priority to get the time from the staff experts on how to handle budgets and preparation of the proposals. Unfortunately, once we got the proposal awarded, all that support essentially is on the PI, and it's gone. So I need to do all the meeting, scheduling, and everything. But I'm in constant conversation with the Office of Research to say, look, this is a high impact, very important 5 campuses, 7 PIs proposal. We need some more support to handle some of the logistics, right? So that then the PIs can focus on the research and the outreach and teaching. And that's a conversation I would recommend everybody to do. If you don't have an initiative like that, go to your dean, go to your department chair and say, I'm going to write this large proposal. I will need some support to get it going.
So Ricardo, how many collaborative projects are there on yours?
Could you repeat the question?
How many, are there separate collaborative proposals tied to yours? I think there's only one. So one model that Ricardo has used is it's a single proposal, and the other team members are all in subawards. So it's kind of clear, hey, if there's a problem, who do we talk to? So Sriram,
So if I understood your question correctly, you were interested not just in the proposal prep, but how do we do things after the grant was awarded?
Well, actually, my perception, and again, I would like to hear your input, is that 5 years ago, you could create a successful large-scale proposal just with one or more, I mean, the PI plus a few co-PIs, depending on the size, and the grad students would contribute the graphs and make sure the BibTeX was correct. I mean, all the usual stuff.
Got it.
Now, that's kind of the minimum threshold. If you want to have a successful proposal among all the other competitors, you need to have professional non-faculty staff who can do the educational outreach, the web pages, preparing the reverse site visit, all of the stuff, making sure compliance that was mentioned in that, all of that. And so that seems to have changed, but few people actually get told as to, you need to go to your university administration and say, you want us to do a large-scale proposal, but unless you're willing to dedicate 2 full-time staff members for a year, you're just asking for a lot of wasted faculty effort. I'm making up a number 2 here, obviously.
Right. So universities have gotten smarter with that. So you heard from Ricardo that support exists. I think the more crucial thing is, what about the support after the grant is awarded? Because that factors into the review as well. So it's great that you have like good copywriters, people who can do like graphic artists to do all of the nice things for your proposal. But afterwards, what do you do with it? If your proposal has a lot of studies, then who coordinates with the IRB? Who manages the proposals, right? Who manages the data? Who manages the web page? And I think part of it is you can plan for that and you can put that in your proposal. Furthermore, if our outreach was about reaching out to underrepresented minority students, having an REU program, and we wanted to track the outcomes. We wanted someone who is an expert on this topic to say, look, you're doing a great job here. Look, if you did these things differently. So we wanted people to administer surveys. We wanted people to study these students. So we have someone with a background in, I think, sociology, and who's in the School of Education, who's actually a co-PI, and that person really has taken hold of that and is studying, like using ethnographic techniques on exactly what the students are learning, how are they learning, how can we make the learning experience better, how does alienation happen, and so all of these are very important, and we are not the experts there. So yes, a bulk of the budget does go to grad students and postdocs, but you do need to think about what happens if the proposal gets awarded. You can't then go, oh no, how am I supposed to manage all of this? So there's got to be a budget, there's got to be a plan, and that has to be in the proposal. And we did have that in our proposal, thanks to Meeko, right? I'm sitting here, but Meeko is the one who takes the credit for that.
Yeah, just to same thing. So from the proposal preparation and now the proposal execution, we have budgeted and have a team science expert as the project manager, who is a non-faculty staff. And without her, I have no idea how I'll do this. And it's, so she is managing just to keep us together and the things going. Yeah, absolutely.
I have a quick thought addressed to people that haven't done a big center type proposal or a big frontier scale proposal before. I've done a few of these recently, and this one was actually successful. So I would say that if you're thinking of doing this, prepare for a change in what you do in your day-to-day job, especially during the preparation part. And then once funded, it sort of goes into overdrive. Everything is going to be quite different. So you need to be prepared to up your leadership game if you're thinking of doing this and you haven't done it before. I had to. I was very bad at a lot of things that needed to happen for this to be successful, even to get it to this point. And I had to do a lot of learning as we went along. So be ready for that. Maybe you all had different experiences and were totally ready for it, but I feel like it was a good learning experience for me. And it's like up your leadership, up your management game as you go through this.
Okay, so I know we're behind schedule. I'd like to thank our panel. And if you have questions for them about, if you're thinking about a frontier and want to gain some insight into the overall process, including the dreaded reverse site visit, the kinds of things that we ask as program directors, feel free to talk to them later. We now have a keynote with George Pappas, and Vishal will introduce George. So thank you, guys.